Hello. Hello, hello.
Hello. Long time no see, everybody. How are you doing?
Greetings. We're
Mm.
all in the same clothes. That must be.
Regular wash days, that's what that does.
Yeah.
So, hello everyone, and welcome to What Will the Small Party Do? Last time we played through the Quest of the Red Blade, which was one of the adventures that Chaoisum released to commemorate the life of Greg Stafford. It was indeed one of Greg Stafford's unpublished adventures, and was refigured and republished for this event. So, in our usual style, we've played through that scenario. And for this session, what we're going to do is chat about the game, the scenario, perhaps things we could think to improve it, and that sort of stuff. So, first impressions. I think for a couple of you, it might have been the first time you played Pendragon in ages, if at all.
Yeah.
Did you kind of like get into the spirit of it happily enough? Were there any barriers to entry, so to speak?
It's no, I mean it was a lot of fun. I think I would have quite liked to coin a phrase that we're starting to build into our lexicon. I would have liked to lick the book a little bit because I bet there's a load of cool little combat widgets and doodads that you can kind of play with. We did dabble with reckless attacks and using our passions and so the system felt very fun in that regard, that you could do stuff that made yourself feel awesome, which I always like. So yeah, it was good. I'd like to see how the personality traits play out over long term. They sounded fun. But yeah, it was good.
Cool. So, I guess I'll probably start as GM. Feel free if anybody else wants to direct the conversation or else, but I'll talk about what I was presented with, and then perhaps that might lead into some other conversations. So, the product itself is a PDF. It's about 16 pages, I think. It's got a nice little bit of artwork of Greg Stafford dressed as a knight, which is a nice little touch, as kind of like your lord. It gives you a fairly straightforward setup. You've got to go somewhere and get a red sword, the red death blade. You don't get too much information. So there's a little bit about you go here and you go there, and it skips through the first part of the journey, which is probably fair enough. I think if you're playing a Pendragon campaign, it's easy for someone to stick some more adventures in there if they wanted to pad that out. For the sake of our 2-hour slot of doing a stream game, we didn't bother, which is fine. The only problem possibly I've got, or the thing that might trip people up, is there's a lot of names there already that he throws at you and places, and doesn't give you a lot of support about what they are or why you should care. I think if you watch back at the stream game we played, we just skipped past a lot of it, and I think that's the way to do that bit, unless you want to make something of it. So that seemed fair, unless anyone's got any objections to that bit.
I think
I like that bit. I think it's always, sometimes in any game, especially when you're playing a one shot, you can lose half an hour to people chewing the scenery with their introductions and just getting into character and just saying stuff. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that at all. That's sometimes the best bit of the game, but it does chew into quite a bit of time. And best, I think, I like the way that happened. We skipped forward, went for a few locations, a little bit of a travelogue. You can imagine the knights on their horses with their retinue behind them, all moving along ridges and through mist and stuff, and then get to decision points. Happy with that.
Cool. Yeah. So
I've got. Sorry, just before you go on,
Go
I
on.
think, and this might, this is slightly off the beaten track with specifically what we're talking about, but I always find it curious. Yeah, as you can imagine. I always find it slightly curious that people who write adventures that are designed to be an adventurer then deliberately leave places for other adventurers to insert themselves on their adventure. Why leave time for a subquest? It's not your responsibility as an adventurer writer. You should be writing an awesome end-to-end experience that players can play. Don't leave time for people to get distracted with other shizzle, is my opinion.
yeah, I mean the scenario doesn't specifically say insert more things here if you want them. I just think that immediately jumped to my mind. I think one of the things with Pendragon is you generally go somewhere to do something, so there's always going to be some sort of travel. So what I liked about this particular scenario is that, like, the first bit of travel in safe lands, it just kind of skips you through,
Right.
but gives you like one or two sentences about various things,
Okay.
like the place that's famous for its ale and the big river and whatever. So I like that it kind of like fast forwards to the bit where you're in border country, and then that's when you start doing things when there's things that might go wrong, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
So that element I quite liked.
And actually, if you've got your ongoing campaign, You can easily integrate previously travelled to locations into the travelogue narrative just to flesh it out. Because Pendragon is, I think, very much a game that rewards campaign play, because things like the big list of names, the already established locations, those are things that would exist in a campaign environment.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So the bit where you get to the Castle of the Crane, I think, works out fine. It's a bit odd in a way. So this adventure, like a lot of the bits of it, feel like it was written in 1985. I don't know if it was, but it does feel like this is one of those forgotten adventures that Greg wrote early, if you will, because of the way some of the stuff is. Like you have to make a hunting roll to guess whether you know whether the crane's magical or what. I don't think you might as well just tell people.
Yeah,
like it does say make a hunting roll, but if you all fail, then what you do, you just not tell people stuff. Then like it still looks like a big magical crane. So bits like that, I'm not sure of. The knights come up to speak to you, and we kind of play through that. All right, it suggests maybe making trusting suspicious rolls,
right?
Which so you might decide that you don't like these warriors, but there's then a paragraph that goes into if you choose to try and fight them, they'll run off, and if you pursue them, there's some men with longbows up an unassailable cliff that the horses can't ride up, and they'll all start shooting you for 46 plus 10 points of damage. Until you either all die or you ride off. And if you ride off, you can't get on with the rest of the adventure. So literally says the adventure ends here. And it's like, that's odd. Like, it feels like it could be something else to do.
Yeah, definitely old.
So we not like ride around the lands to somewhere else, or like why do you force like a lethal combat or death as an option based on some suspicious rolls that you're asking that you might want to roll? I don't know. Right. So I personally avoid all that bit. I just say because if you remember that you sort of like have a brief stop off, and the guy says, "Oh, the guys in the next terrain, they're all baddies, and you don't want to trust them." So that's where that comes from. But I think that whole bit can only lead to your players being suspicious of the next encounter you have unnecessarily,
right?
Especially if the result of that is the adventure's over, because that doesn't feel satisfactory.
No.
So I think for modern sensibilities with that, I'd be more open to still delivering the same speech, but you guys recognise that it's probably cultural rivalry, or you offer some other way around the solution if they choose not to go to the Castle of the Crane. But the Castle of the Crane is where you get the information about the split bloodlines and where the swords come from, and the bit at the end with like, do you hand the sword over or not, all that. So if you miss out the Castle of the Crane, you seem to be missing the core part of the adventure. So I don't know why you try and put people off going there. Myself, it's easily fixed, but it feels an odd set of things to set up to sort of try and make people not do the adventure.
It was very one-shotty in that particular moment where it felt like there was a huge exposition dump, and that's what that guy's job was.
And it is huge.
Yeah,
I shortcutted a lot. There's a lot of names.
I just wonder if there's I can't think off the top of my head, but I guess if you were going to run this again, or if I was going to run this, I think that would be the point where I'd maybe try and show some of the backstory, maybe show some heraldry or some tapestries or something. Yes. Maybe there's a book there, or you meet Brother Dogmail and he tells you, be careful with the Lord, he's sensitive about his brother, that kind of thing, and just sort of maybe...
Yeah, you can spread that information out in different points. Yeah, agreed. Definitely. And it's a good point in heraldry, because that's a big part of Pendragon. So if you could show shields that look very similar but with slightly different devices to demonstrate that they're from the same family.
Yeah. Or maybe like an ancient heraldic shield that he's scratched off what looks to be a red sword or something.
Yeah, something like that as a visual cue. I think that's one thing that is missing from this, apart from the Greg Stafford image at the start and the castle that you come to eventually. There's nothing else for anybody else. So given that there's all these names and things, perhaps for this big list of exposition you've got with all these somebody such as son of such a body, if you had a nice little family tree perhaps. I thought about putting one together myself, but it seemed like more effort than it was worth. But
I presume if it's an unpublished adventure, then you certainly wouldn't have gone as far as ordering art for it back in the day. So that would have been, It would have been off of his notes, wouldn't it? Text only on a typewriter, probably.
Yeah. No, quite. I understand why it's not there, but I think for people running it, like you saw, a lot of the assets people have seen from watching the show are things I put together. So that's something you might have to do if you run this scenario. I guess it's worth pointing out in that respect.
Baz, you make a really good point about the fact that it was an unpublished scenario. Perhaps there's the linear nature, the choke points, exposition, all these perhaps were considerations as to why, when you consider how long Greg Stafford was involved in Pendragon, as to why he didn't publish it. That's one of those that needs a complete rework.
Yeah. It wasn't going to be his best work that he's not published, is it? It's going to be one of the ones that's perhaps in need of polishing and so forth. Yeah, I think that's all fair enough. So you kind of get your big exposition jump, you know where you're going, and then you encounter the Knights of Gomery on the way. I didn't mind that encounter too much. Again, if you read actually what it says on the page, I'm sceptical. There's lots of like mech heraldry at -5. Well, the sample adventures that you get with the game have, I think, the best heraldry anyone's got is 11 or something. So why are you making the skill roll so awkward?
Yeah, I got heraldry 3.
I think the first 5 rolls you asked me to make, probably just by luck more than judgment, they're all sub 5, sub 3 actually.
Yeah.
it was almost ludicrous. These skills are just, they're not helping. And some of them just seem, I think Matt said this as well about, was it Venery? You had like a terrible one and a great one that looked identical. There's a couple of those in there too. It's just like, how do I get to be so good at that and so poor at that? And they seem like they'd be on the same web.
Yeah.
But,
actually, as a point of interest, since last week when we played, I looked up Venery in Pendragon. It's the Aquitanian cultural skill that combines flirting and romance.
Sexual indulgence. I was closest.
The closest. You win the point.
I kind of wish I'd known that.
So just the big train that you were trying it on.
Yeah, right? I would have definitely inflamed a passion for that.
That's possibly on me for not having the most up-to-date rules to check what it was supposed to be.
I'll tell you what, that's a mark against you as a GM, not knowing instantly what Venery means in a slight addition change.
It's only my best skill, I'm just saying.
I think it made for an amusing point in the game, so I'm quite happy it was a thing that came up.
To be fair, that does raise an interesting point, actually, which is Pendragon is very much a game that is rooted in its topic. So it doesn't shy away from using those really unusual terms for skill names and things like that. So it's not necessarily hugely intuitive when you first look at the character sheet, unless you've sort of played the game, read the book, as to what some of the stuff is, which, because it is all about that kind of genre emulation piece dialed up to 11. You can see that.
Yeah, I like that. That's okay, isn't it? I mean, this is a hobby, isn't it? And it's a passion as well. Yeah. And it's a little bit studious, but that's okay. I mean, I didn't know what a bardiche was till I read AD and D. I've learned all kinds of words from role playing, and I think it's quite nice. If apart from anything else, you come away from a game with a bit of a little bit of studies, all right, isn't it? And learning new things.
Yeah, and you can see the stats, for example. There's no intelligence, there's no wisdom, because actually that's not necessarily the whole sort of Arthurian myth stories of knights. They've just got the stats you need, the little extra stats you see, the fact that it front and centers combat and weapon skills and regards everything else as other. It's all dialed into that, so it's really, really laser focused.
Yeah, I think we can probably divert to characters a bit there, since you guys have mentioned it. For me, when I run it as a one-shot, normally I have my own characters that I use, and I have more things that the knights are famous for. And I'll definitely specifically have one of the bad personality traits at a high number. So we had a selfish knight, for example, but I'll make sure that at least every knight's got one thing. There's a hot button topic to press, and then try and put something in the adventure that directly relates to that, so it comes up.
Turn up the contrast a bit, I think would be useful. I've got quite a few 10-10 pairs, which is milk toast, isn't it?
And you want 2 or 3 16, 17, 18s on there, at least, to make it look a bit, on both sides, what I mean. But I suppose the other thing is, like you're saying about the skills, there's a weird spread, and the skills aren't that great. There's a few 10s. And I think they are starting characters, to be fair, from the look of it, just as a quick once over. But to get the most out of a one shot, I think you want better than starting characters. I think we said that about a lot of games.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the pro of a starting character is there tends to be less to learn. But if you're dead in 15 minutes, your learning's over no matter what, isn't it?
It's a harsh lesson. Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly fair because, I've got a character here, got skills at dancing, law, things like that. Whereas I wonder if tailoring the characters to the scenario, because this is a travel to meet people, fight people scenario. So skills that would fit the encounters in the scenario would have perhaps sort of helped push things forward. Because, I wonder if somebody who's never played Pendragon before, or maybe somebody's a less experienced games master than Gaz, might hit that point of skill roll, fail, what do I do now sort of thing. And if this characters are better tailored to scenario, that would have helped avoid that.
I suppose the other thing is we only had 3 knights, and I think there's 6 available. So maybe if you have all the knights, then the skill spread means that you've got more bases covered. I'm not sure thoroughly, but
my best is flirting, and my second best is music. I genuinely don't know how I could have turned that around. We didn't meet a female.
Which, for a courtly game, or where you've got some aspect of that, then, or it's that bit at the start, like I say, we breeze through the first bits, but if there's a chance to speak to a lord's daughter or some other thing going on, then that gives you a chance to use those skills, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, potentially another way to get the sword, but,
Yeah, potentially, yeah.
Who knows? There are some bits you didn't encounter, so we'll get to them, but I still don't think flirting would have helped you, to be quite honest. So we have the Knights of Gormreh who you meet. That's another odd one. It's pretty certain there's going to be some kind of fight, really. And again, if they win, you're taken away, put in prison, and ransomed off, and that's the end of the adventure. So it again feels a bit. You do overcome them, which was good, but it feels a hard end again when the perhaps doesn't need to be. And Dogmail's ability to, if you get a major wound, he can stop that with his chirurgery, but he doesn't give any hit points back or anything. So it's tough. It can go.
Well, I'm glad he had a use.
Yeah,
I'm glad he had a use on paper because he was of no bloody use at all in the story. He was just tagged along like the tail on the dog.
Yeah, he was just there to say that you don't have to make hunting rolls to get through the mountains and things like that. He just tells you the way.
Wow,
he's a bit of a. I guess I could have played him up more just for the character. We could have had a bit more balance between us, I guess, but I wasn't massively invested in him. I don't think you guys cared too much.
And actually, time constraint for a 2-hour session being that there are some things you've got to set to the side. So I think you're absolutely right, not making them a priority.
Yeah, I was happy enough just making my quick bomb knots about him every now and again, which just had a little bit. Okay, so pretty shortly after that, you get to the Castle of Kaya, which actually is probably half of the book or the PDF. And you don't see a lot of it. So you kind of get in there, you can check out that the knights and the defences aren't that great. And then you quickly go to the king, and then you get to say something to him. And I tried to give you a little bit of rope with this, but it gives you like some probable questions or things you're going to ask or say, and then his response to that, which shows its age again. So if it's anything about destroying the evil pagan practices of the land or whatever, he reacts with anger. If you say we seek adventure, he reacts with scorn. If you say passing through, he's suspicious. If you say you want to look at his sword, he's suspicious. If you say you want to get the blade, it's rage and just fight or flight straight away. And if you only say to aid in the War of Gormreh, he demands an oath of fealty. And then you get to hang around for a bit.
So basically, it's a pretty linear scene from the way it's written.
Yeah, and then there's a bunch of stuff after that about fight or flight, and do you hang around? And hanging around is foolish, but players are sometimes foolish. So if they are foolish, do this thing. It's written in that kind of like old way of thinking, way of adversarial GM, and your stupid players have hung about after saying the wrong thing, so this is what you do to them. So I had to kind of like play around with that a little bit. I was going to kind of give you a bit more rope, but as soon as you said, and we want your sword, I kind of had to go for we're in the fight or flight section of the book, I think. We could have done more with it, but there's no other characters in the castle to interact with. So if there'd been a wife or a daughter or a subversive knight or like something to go along with. But everybody's in loyal. What happens if you do manage to place him in some way? You get shown to the guest rooms, which are awful and decrepit, and that's where you sort of meet Pig Boy. And again, it takes some work to gem it because he sort of whispers through the slats in the wall to you to say hello, or who are you and stuff. And then it's as written. It says he tells you nothing for the rest of the day. I don't understand adventures written like that because it's like, what do you think the players are going to do then? I don't understand a group where you guys would all sit around and go, okay, well, we'll just do nothing for a day then and wait till tomorrow. Does he tell us anything now?
Yeah.
Like in that intervening day, you'd be, well, can we sneak into the king's quarters, or I want to send my squire to, like, it's written as if you do nothing and wait 24 hours to see what happens. And there's a lot of that kind of feel to the setup that days pass as you heal, and then something happens. It's like, I don't know any group of players that would sit there for days doing nothing. I'm pretty sure you'd all want to do something.
So I'll counterpoint that if I can. That
sure, go for it.
If you're playing Pendragon as more than just a one shot, if you look at the way the sort of the Arthur stories play out, they are moments of activity. I'm not going to say action, but moments where things happen followed by big periods of downtime. So I think if a group's sort of cleaving close to that, especially if you're a few scenarios in and used to that sort of scenario winter thing, they might be willing to take the slower pace a little bit. But I totally get your point that players are naturally active, so it would have to be a specific decision on behalf of the group to sort of adopt that play style.
And again, it's I don't mind a slower pace, but it's something to do. Like, I don't understand saying the boy talks to you, then won't talk to you again until tomorrow. It's like, why don't we just have that conversation, whatever it is? So that'd be my recommendation, is to have things in mind if the players are going to hang around. And I'd probably take the edge off how angry the king gets about things.
Right.
I'll give you a better warning about it or something, because I tried, like, in my head anyway, I don't think it played out that way for you guys. I was trying to give you a bit of rope to come up with some way of not mentioning the Red Blade or some other deal you're going to come up with or something. I don't know how you play that out with a jealous, evil king who wants to keep hold of his sword at all costs.
Well, and we're kind of knightly dudes who aren't really going to go there and lie like D&D adventurers, are we?
No. This is an odd bit of the scenario. There's a lot of, like, the very first guy you meet, if you lie to him, he says, why are you lying to me? Because he spots it. And then the next guy you kind of have to lie to, and then you don't again. And then it's all a bit...
Yeah.
And then, certainly with this adventure, there's certain things you do and you lose honour for it, or hospitality. So it doesn't feel like it's a good Pendragon game in that respect. I like Pendragon 4, you have a certain set of tenets you're supposed to stick to as knights.
Right.
And you have to think of a clever way around it. So you can't, like, sneak into the king's chambers and nick his sword. You've got to think of a different way of doing it.
Yeah.
But then you've got to have some way of doing it. You can't block off all options and say, I'm going to penalise you on loads of stats if you do the thing that I'm only letting you do as a scenario. I think it's tough for someone who hasn't played before to run this scenario as written based on what the information it gives you.
So, I mean, the potential, if you did stick around, would be to switch to playing the squires for a scene and do a kind of montage scene of what the squires learn and they can figure out, and then effectively count as a form of information gathering for your knights.
That's a cool idea. I love
Yeah,
that.
that's good.
To then move on to.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, very cool idea.
I like the idea of introducing more mixed emotions and opinions within the castle as well, to give you people to go to.
I genuinely thought the way the story was kind of unfolding, that offering to help defend the castle against the horde was the right solution.
It's very clever, except for the we want the sword in return bit, but obviously, that was playing to character. So
yeah, but then in a way you could have turned that story into a bit more of a tragedy, where the king finally gives up the sword and says thank you, and then he kind of passes away or something, and it's like the burden he's carried or something like that would have been quite a little bit more poignant then.
Or even agrees to it and then reneges on his word.
Yeah, so those are good ideas, but they are counterpointed by the bit of the adventure that you didn't see, which, through the power of the internet, I will reveal to you now. So there's a big thing about it expects you when you have that fight with the king as well, that you will then run away, as that's the most sensible option. rather than following the king because it's dangerous or something. Which I don't understand why any players would do that, but.
I mean, he was doing 6 points of damage through everything. That is kind of tasty.
Yeah, but at that point, that's before that point, before you even fight him, sort of thing. If he's run off,
right?
It's like that very first bit of it before you run up the stairs. So that's a bit weird, and it assumes that there's a big couple of pages on the pursuit and what happens and which direction you go in and stuff. And I just don't think most knights would run away. And there's a whole thing about the mechanics. And it says there's this many knights, and it's like 1 per character when you meet them, and 2 warriors per character. And then when in the meeting hall, it's like a different number. And it's like, well, there's only 3 knights in this castle, you told me, and now you're saying there's another 3.
Yeah,
like have turned up from nowhere, and some more warriors when there's only 6 in the castle, and you told me there's 8 now. And then some more appear on the 5th, 7th, and 10th round, and then there's some more knights that will appear after 30 rounds. I don't imagine any battle going to 30 rounds, but the idea is there's some other knights somewhere. So it's really confusing to read through and try and document as a GM how many people are supposed to be in this castle and where they are and when they turn up. So that will take some thought for GMs. I'll just point that out. I could handle it, but it doesn't make sense when you read the words and numbers compared to what they told you previously.
That's where a more kind of modern prep style, like the lazy GM style, where you just say it's the castle. He has 6 knights, 10 men at arms, and some yeoman archers. It's up to you as a GM to deploy them throughout the castle. They can either be en masse if you want when the king receives them, or whatever. Yeah. But you just need to then keep track. Whereas that sounds very convoluted. That you've got to try and a shifting sands number of people that you've got to kind of work out where they are and what they're doing.
It tells you how many there are and then changes it in the text later on. It's basically the issue with it, which is a bit confusing. Then it gives you things that the players might do, like try and free the serfs. And I don't know why you would. And it even says if they do this is silly and anachronistic, so don't do it. Well, why is it even in the PDF then?
Right.
It's very confusing. He's obviously had some players at some point who tried to do that or thought it was a good idea. But anyway, there's lots of other things like that. And then there's a pursuit. And to get to the end, Pig Boy, who I just threw in because otherwise we weren't going to meet him, is actually the king's son.
Right.
And there's a ritual that he does every now and again where he gets his son and chops him up and puts him in a cauldron, and then everybody eats him, and then the king gets renewed, and then he's back to being Brian Blessed with a big bushy black beard and muscly and hard again. Right. So there isn't going to be a point where he hands over the sword and he's the whole point of his thing is he's going to do this renewal ritual by killing his son, and then carry on for another 50 years till he...
That's way more interesting. Like, if we'd found that out and the king was like, yes, he's old and decrepit. We're like, we want the soul, yo. He's like, well, yes, after tomorrow there is a big ceremony that we need to perform. Oh, okay. And then you find out that it's actually he's going to kill his son and sacrifice him while we're doing courtly dances and stuff with all the ladies. Then suddenly that adventure's like way cooler. Now what do we do? Do we just steal the son and peg it? Do we fight the king? Do we try and interrupt the ceremony?
Yeah. So I pushed the 5 button because we were in a 2-hour clock, and it felt like
sure.
we should do it. But in other circumstances, we had a 4-hour session, for example. I would have been looking for ways to introduce that.
Yeah, definitely.
Make that happen. And again, it's the lack of people to speak to in the castle that I find a bit frustrating or do anything with. Because it's either Pig Boy or the king, really, and nobody else has got strong opinions. And there's this whole thing, if you leave the castle and go the other way from where you've come, and how the villagers will report on you, and what the next village is, and all this stuff that I think, I don't know. For me, I can't see how any of that would happen, so I don't know why it's in the book. It'd be better to fill those pages with cool stuff about people in the castle, or things you might find out, or folklore tales.
Or just make it an 8-page book.
Yeah, or that.
Yeah.
So there is that element of it, and there is a thing with Pig Boy's plight. So he tries to run off as well. If you have ended up not revealing you want the red blade, and you're in the guest house and he has a conversation with you, and you kind of find out he's the son, he'll then try and run off, and then the king comes to you and says, "You need to help me find my son," as well as sending all his own men out and stuff. And you have a decision to make around bringing him back or not.
So again, that would be really interesting.
Well,
and
especially if you double that up with the whole. What if Pig Boy went missing? The king's like, yeah, you can have the sword, but you need to do this quest for me. Find my son. Knowing full well that the king's going to get you to go and get his son. You bring him back. Go, give us the sword. He's going, all right, I'll give it to you tomorrow. Then he does the ceremony, turns into
Up to
Brian
the hilt.
Johnson. Yeah.
Yeah. Or if you've sworn to get the son back, then you find out while you're out getting the son back, you're taking him back.
Oh, it's even better.
That's that great sort of, I've sworn an oath, but it's an oath to evil.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
even better.
So there is some stuff around that, and then unfortunately it's done in a weird way so that you like lose honor and stuff if you don't give him his son back because you've sworn an oath. But it feels a bit bad that you sort of getting punished for doing the right thing a little way. But so there is that kind of thing, and whether you turn him over or not is fine. There is some interesting meat to be had there, don't deny. We had some good ideas. There's a weird thing around finding him again where you've got to make a roll at -10 to spot him, and it's like, come on. Like, just give the players a chance to actually make a roll, will you please? Why are you making this so hard? Because if you don't find him, then what do? You're taking a fun thing out of the adventure.
Yeah.
So don't do that. You can do all the thing with merciful checks or cruel or whatever else as well around it, which we didn't really do, but that's all in there. And then we come to the terrible feast. So if you have hung around, you've not done much with gum or anything, and you found Pig Boy or someone else has, you've got the terrible feast. And at that point, it says when you go in, you're all disarmed. You have to hand your swords over. Which I find odd, because when you turned up and you didn't know who you were, you get to keep your swords. But if you go out and find his son and bring him back, you have to hand your swords over. So, what?
What?
So, and then you have a fight with all the knights and everything, but you haven't got your weapons. And it's like, well, that just wouldn't. You all get killed, surely. So it's a bit odd, and there's a thing about how much honour you lose for each stage of the ceremony that's going on if you don't stop it, and various other things. So it just, I think it's just written in an old style where you used to have to try and think what the players would do, and they'd do weird stuff, and then you write down what happens if they do those things or don't do them.
Out of interest, bearing in mind that the ceremony was he takes his son, murders him, chops him up into a soup cauldron, and then feeds him to the village. What were the different stages that had different honour losses?
So you lose a point for turning the boy in the first place.
Right.
A point for attending the ceremony at all, unless you're pagan, in which case fair dues. You get the sort of dragged out and then unceremoniously chopped up. But you get 2 points if he's killed. You get 5 more points if you eat any of the flesh or the soup or whatever. Okay. And then there's another thing which is weird, which feels tacked on, where after he renews, he has a big orgy, takes all his clothes off, and then everybody starts shagging. So you lose another one if you take part in the orgy. And that just feels like, well, you've already chopped a boy up and put him in a stew and eaten him.
In for a penny.
I don't think we need like, why is the orgy on top as well?
Yeah.
It feels like, did he more evil? Was that not bad enough?
Either that or he's looking down going, oh, we haven't tested lustful yet.
Yeah, that's I need to get all my skill checks.
I need to get my skill checks in.
Do you remember how early D&D scenarios are written effectively as attrition wars, where the GM was using the scenario to wear down the players and their role was to try and survive to the point where they get gold and experience? Yeah. This has almost that kind of feel to it, where it's effectively the GM is using the scenario to grind the knights down. And it just seems really sort of out of character for an Arthurian myth-style story. Because, it's crazy stuff like people getting chopped up and eaten happens in some of the Arthurian stories, but not quite in such a granular way.
Yeah. So I think what we're saying as we go through this is like it's of its time, this scenario. And you'll need to do some work to make it more interesting and less grindy. So with that, one way that you either kill the king and take his stuff. The sword is not cursed, but I did like the way the story went, that we kind of thought it was. Nobody wanted to touch it. There was a thing around it. I think that's perfectly fine. I think that added to the story. You kind of just go back to the guy, the king of the crane, and he asks for his sword, and whether you do or not, then the just crane will cry out if he tries to grab it and things like that. Which is, I think that bit about the crane is just a nice little touch. So it's an interesting chieftain to meet along the way. He has a thing about him, like there's something specific about that town or whatever, or that castle. And then you get a bunch of glory, and that's kind of the scenario. Okay. So I think the bones are there for a good scenario. I think you've got to look at it with modern sensibilities. Are there any other thoughts about adding improvements to it or other things you could do?
I think you've covered most of them, Gaz. It's different NPCs to interact with, get a bit more information from. Front and center, the sort of evil plan of the king, rather than just sort of getting the sword. Yeah, but I mean, I don't think Pendragon scenarios need to be less linear, because they are about questing knights, which are a fairly linear kind of mindset of thing. But I think you want some more interesting diversions along the way in NPCs, and actually a kind of, as soon as you attach an evil plot to the other end of it as well, as Matt said, it becomes much more interesting. So I think I'd front and center that a bit more. I'd get rid of a lot of the unnecessary die rolls, or certainly the penalties attached to them. I think most of it, has already come out from my point of view. I don't know what anybody else thinks.
I think because you're playing goodly knights, I do think there's some sort of superhero tropes that you can build into. So he, when he kind of got wrathful, but realised, that the fight was turned against him, maybe he could get like an innocent serving girl and hold her there, or he could shove her out the window and she's now clinging on from the window, that kind of thing. But it depends on, I guess, what kind of flavour of Pendragon you want, right? So if you want it quite gritty, then that probably is less of a thing. If you want a bit more Alan Rickman in your life, then you could go that route. I think the one thing that was interesting that I picked up on, and I didn't look at the rest of the other pre-gens, but you were saying if you're pagan and you take part in the ceremony, was there actually pagan NPC or pagan pre-gens?
I would think one of them might be.
Right.
A quick search now.
But it's interesting that they kind of picked that it was picked out by the adventure. Is the religion?
There is one pagan. Yeah.
There is one pagan. Is religion an important part of Pendragon?
Yes and no. Yes, in that your religious bonus will come from different stats. So if you're Christian, you'll expect it to be chaste.
Okay.
Whereas if you're pagan, you'll expect it to be lustful. So you get two completely different knights from that point of view just by picking a different religion.
Right. I would.
And then you can create some tension within the party that, like, some guys trying to be good and proper, and the pagan's just running off.
I don't know if it was I wasn't paying enough attention or not, but I didn't get the impression that the Red Blade King was a pagan, and that was a pagan castle, and we were like essentially 3 Christian knights going in there. I didn't get that vibe at all, so I don't know if I missed it or whether that could be strengthened a little bit.
I think it's just that the source of his evil's hidden, and like we've discussed, if you bring that out more, then it becomes apparent that the only real hint you get is that he worships Idris, so he gets his power from the evil god or whatever it is at the castle with the dragon that he sends out if he doesn't do sacrifice. Right. So you kind of get foreshadowing about human sacrifice and stuff from that, and that's probably where the power comes from.
Okay.
But I didn't particularly play it up because of the way the scenario went, but yeah, you could definitely do more with it.
Yeah.
I suppose it also matters if you're going to put this into a Pendragon campaign. When you put it into the campaign, will sort of affect how important the religion is, because in the Uther and Anarchy periods, paganism's much stronger, religion's much less of a thing. But once you get to Arthur and the sort of the chivalry, the right, the goodness part, it will front and center the Christianity message much more, I suspect.
Yeah, there's a lot more complexity to Pendragon as a campaign compared to a one-shot. So, yeah, there are all kinds of things you can stick in there. I think overall, I don't mind the setup for the adventure. I think it just needs a bit of polish. Like you say, it feels like it's the bones of an adventure, and you have to ignore or work around a lot of the skill rolls or things, or the sort of 5 or 6 places it says, and the adventure is over, because that's clearly not the way the player plays. But that aside, I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah, it was good fun.
I think.
Yeah, and it was fun.
Good. I'm not sure. I've got more to say. I think I fiddled with the stats a little bit. The knights that you meet to fight against have all got sword skill 19.
Oh,
Blimey.
So they're all better than you, basically, and that felt wrong. So I reduced them by 3 or 4 in most occasions.
Right.
and actually, if there's one per player and men at arms, and they're better, that's almost like gonna lead to an end of scenario.
Yeah, and we had the interesting thing where someone failed to inspire passion every time as well, which did handicap you as a group. Because if someone fails and there's like 6 knights, it's not as bad.
Yeah.
If someone fails and there's 3 knights, like that's quite a big proportion.
I was going to say though, because I think my pre-gen's slightly wonky insofar as my loyalty to the Giant Slayers is 20, so I literally can't fail the passion. So I'm just going to use that every time and run around at plus 10 on everything on my key weapon stat pretty much every time.
Yes, I thought you might spell that.
Yeah.
So
I only exploited it once, but yeah, I was like, oh, that's
which is why I didn't keep bringing in all my passions to counteract it by giving out my guys plus 10 as well.
Yeah, no,
so that's where I want. But yeah. I think that's certainly for starting characters. Like, don't have something at 20 so they can't fail, because your squire had an age of 20 as well, didn't he?
He was age 20, yeah.
So that takes all the fun out of, does my squire remember my thing now? Because he always does.
Yes, he does. He's
brilliant. Now it's not fun anymore because it just always succeeds.
Yeah, exactly. I did like the fact that he was better at battle than I was.
Yeah.
That's just weird.
I didn't do. Sorry, man.
You've said this before, Gaz, but I mean, we're not really reviewing the game system, but it's quite like that game system. And wouldn't it have been a different world if RuneQuest had been ended up powered by that back in the day? You know, there's a lot about that. It makes so much sense for, you know, and for a samurai supplement, which we've talked about as well. You know, there's a lot in there to like. I was coming into tonight's game, I was nervous. I've always been nervous about Pendragon and playing characters that, you know, that could be quite two-dimensional and just dudes in plate mail with swords and shields. You can't even see their faces half the time. They've all got a code of honour, so they all act the same way. But you do get differentiation from it. You really do. And I think, and actually, what Greg Stafford didn't have the benefit of in 1985 was a bunch of players who maybe watched Game of Thrones. So we understand what it's like to have different knights now, of all genders and all kind of you know, allegiances and different personalities. I think it makes it's an easier game to play now, arguably, than it was back in the day when you had to read La Mort d'Arthur to really get to grips with it. Yeah.
I think the personality traits are the bit that give you your differentiation as well. You can see straight away, like without doing much, like you're eating and trying to fill your mouth with food, so you didn't tell the truth, and someone else was being suspicious all the time and all that kind of thing. So straight away, that gives you some kind of little bits of personality you can sprinkle in, which is nice.
Yeah, I'd like to run a highlighter over the character sheet. There's a lot on there. And without even going too much into the second page, you had all that lovely life path stuff in there too. There's, you know, but that's fine. There's a lot of meat in a Pendragon character. Shame you're going to get killed within 5 minutes if you play it properly.
Yeah, I didn't do much with the squires either. What I normally do in the games when I run them with the characters I know is have little personalities for the squires as well, so they keep throwing tidbits in different ways. But yeah, there's plenty there, I think. Yes. Run out of ideas for this now. I think the scenario we've discussed is you'll need to provide some of your own art assets and things like that, because there's a lot of names in there and places, and they're all in Cymric. So you probably want something to put in front of your players to like make that clearer. You'll have to do that yourself. We suggest spreading it out to the exposition, because there's a couple of bits where you get big dumps, and it's better to spread that out either via visual clues of heraldry or the priest telling you something or whatever else it might be. We'd like to see, we liked the King of Crane, and that was a nice little thing. So if other lumps along the way have something similar to make them interesting, that's good. The castle itself, get the evil out more obviously. I'll put that front and centre. Don't have the king kick off straight away if you mention the sword, because that leads in one direction and one direction only. And have more interesting people around the castle to chat to or interact with, I think. Then you can get to the interesting bit about, do you save Pig Boy or not, all that kind of thing, which comes out more readily. And that's pretty much it, isn't it, I think?
Yeah.
Maybe you want to monkey around with the pre-gens or your own characters to make them a bit more interesting. less of auto successes, and up some other stats that are a bit too low, just to give you more chance of success. Ignore some of the penalties. But otherwise, it feels good.
I'll tell you what, as an intro, if you've not played Pendragon before, which I haven't done very much, makes you want to play again. So from that perspective, I'd like to play with those characters and go on more quests.
Yeah.
So that's a win.
Yeah, good point. Good point. I enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. Thank you for running, I guess.
No problem. Thank you for playing with your usual verve. So that's what the Smart Party did. We played the classic Pendragon adventure that was around, written by Greg Stafford, and in his honour when he passed. You can grab it from the Chaoisum site. And of course, look at our back catalogue for things like Ironsworn, which Shane kindly ran for us. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, D&D, all kinds of things are racking up in our catalogue as we go along. Let us know what you'd like us to play, any intro scenarios or systems, and we'll try and put them on the packed schedule that we've already got for you. And from me, that's all for now. So thanks for watching What Would the Smart Party Do?
Cheerio.
Bye.